On this evening's panel discussion, we look at Jamaica's progress towards getting rid of illegal guns. Recently, the government introduced a bill that will seek to establish 15-year minimum sentences for illegal possession of a firearm. How have similar strategies like this worked in other jurisdictions? And what can we expect if harsher sentences are adopted? Well, to discuss, we're joined by Wilfred Rattigan, attorney at law and former high-ranking FBI official. And we're also joined by Herb Nelson, intelligence analyst and a founding member of the Jamaica Diaspora Crime Intervention Task Force. And he's also board chair of the Institute of Caribbean Studies Crime and Security Committee Group. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure and my privilege.
Same here.
Is the answer tougher sentences for gun crimes? Let me start with you, Mr. Nelson.
Okay. The gun crimes and those sentences are inconsistent with what we're seeing here in the U.S. as well as the Caribbean. I was just looking at Belize that is doing sentences of 5 years and subsequent crimes of illicit weapons of 7 years. I'm looking at the U.S. that just sentenced an individual from the UK transporting weapons down to St. Kitts, and he got 4.5 years. So it seems that the ballpark is there. Jamaica, by threatening 15 years minimum, first question you have to ask yourself, where are they going to serve it? We are cultivating criminals by putting young people in with hardcore folks. Where are they going to serve it? We have not built any type of prisons recently. We haven't built any in the immediate past. So again, where are they going to serve it? It cannot be Tower Street. Something has to give, and somebody has to take on that responsibility of rehabilitation of our youth.
Mr. Rattigan, what's your view? Is this harsher penalties going to help us deal with our gun crime problem, which is not like any place else in the world? Jamaica seems to be different.
My view is an unequivocal no. And by the way, thank you for having me, and thanks to your listening audience. If you go back to the Firearms Act of 1967, Sections 24 and Section 25, they already make provisions for harsh penalties. For example, if someone is arrested for possession of an illegal firearm in the circuit court, penalty goes up to life. So I don't understand when the minister and others say that they're coming out with harsher penalties. I'm trying to what harsh penalties? You already have it on the books that the circuit court has the authority to sentence someone who has an illegal weapon to life. Aside from that, I don't see any empirical evidence, at least in Jamaica, where imposing harsher sentences will mean that it will be a deterrence on crime. I don't see the correlation.
So harsher penalties, in your view, is not a deterrent?
Like my esteemed colleague Herb just mentioned, and he alluded to the prisons. How the prisons in Jamaica, they weren't set up to deter, rehabilitate, and punish. They weren't. I mean, you can look at the recent videos coming out of the prisons. So how is putting someone in prison for an extended period deter someone on the street whose his livelihood is dependent on being a corner boy? All right, he doesn't go to school. He has no means of earning an income except to engage in illegal activity. How is that going to deter that person? Not only that, think about this. I just saw a clip where they said police said they seized 41 guns in 41 days. That would be, at that rate, 365 guns for the year. Nevertheless, and notwithstanding, the government itself has said on numerous occasions that they estimate illegal weapons being smuggled into Jamaica at the rate of 200 per month. That's 2,400 a year. So at the rate of one per day, you're still going to have 2,035 illegal weapons that are unaccounted for. How do you address the problem? It seems to me as if...
Well, it seems that they think that the problem should be addressed through harsher legislation, but we'll pick up the discussion when we come back. We have to take a quick break. Stay with us.
Welcome back, and we're still looking at Jamaica's progress towards getting rid of illegal guns. Still with us, we have Wilfred Rattigan, attorney at law and former high-ranking FBI official, and Herb Nelson Jr., intelligence analyst and founding member of the Jamaica Diaspora Crime Intervention Prevention Task Force. All right, we just want to continue on this matter of the use of legislation and what is being proposed as it relates to what seems to be happening is the almost taking away of the discretion of the judge in a sense. We know that's what happens when you have a minimum maximum kind of a penalty imposed. If not harsher penalties, how can legislation assist Jamaica in terms of the problem we have with the high volume of illegal weapons, illegal guns in Jamaica? Let's start with you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson, you may need to unmute a bit. We're not hearing you.
Sorry, if you're going to budget amounts that will build new prisons, I would suggest this. Give the responsibility for rehabilitation and for re-education to the JDF. They already have a good thing going with the JCCF, Combined Cadet Group. They have now Marine, Air, they have the regular Army wing. So let us do what we proposed before, is bringing a safer city, smarter community program. Let's build up next on government lands in Newcastle or wherever else those lands are. We don't have to sell it all. We can build on it, and let's build a retraining center that can accommodate vast amounts of our youth. Let's do like the Chinese are doing right now in Western China, and let's have a re-education program. Once we have these young men and women who are being given these weapons, by the way, as Sir P talks about it, the 116s are the ones that are bringing the businessmen. Let's even go back to the 70s and 80s when the politicians were the original dons and they were arming Shower, Spangler, and these other posses. From that time, let us look at saving some of our youth, because our youth, they are not equipped to handle saying no to these dons. They're not equipped to handle saying no to the politicians, and they almost have to assimilate into these gangs to feel that they are protected, to feel empowered.
Hold that point, Mr. Just hold that point 1 second, because I want to get as well, and we are going to talk about some long-term strategies coming up, but I want to hear you, Mr. Rattigan, on another proposal from the National Security Minister announced recently in the Parliament, just ahead of the enactment of this new legislation, Firearms Act, going to the Parliament after going through Joint Select Committee, etc., that gun amnesty will happen just before that to allow criminals to hand over their illegal weapons and without penalty. What do you make of that proposal? A gun amnesty, does that work?
Look, I'm trying to be politically correct, but on this particular point, I cannot. It's absolute rubbish. And I'll tell you why. Think about it like this. What if someone hands in a weapon and that weapon has 40 murders attached to it? Are you going to let that person go? Are you going to give him his $250,000 and let him go? You cannot. The idea that you're going to pay some, not only that, think about the message it sends to the police. the people who are on the front line fighting and in some instances dying to protect and preserve life and to reassure, right? Instead of using that money, and we don't even know how much money is budgeted for that, but instead of using that money to make the lives of the policemen and women more comfortable, safer, and so on and so forth, we're taking that money and we're giving it to criminals. And rest assured, I can tell you this, that they're not going to give you their best weapons. If they give you weapons, they're not going to give you their best weapons. As I've said before, they're going to give you a whole rusty gun and collect the 250,000 and buy a new gun and have some money left in their pocket.
But Mr. Rattigan, you were just telling us that the police getting 41 guns in 41 days isn't enough. How are we going to get the guns?
Well, good point. I'm saying it's not enough because the focus is not where it should be. We should be focused on protecting our borders. Don't forget that government mentioned that they have identified at least 140 illegal points of entry into Jamaica, right? How do we, and don't forget about the airplane that crash landed off the coast of Jamaica, where by the time the police got there, the cargo and the occupants were gone. And the only thing we got from the ministry was that the occupants had left the country. Now, then we hear about the intelligence architecture, and I'm straying a little bit, but we heard about the intelligence architecture that allowed the police to capture the 2 Colombians responsible for the death of the former president of Haiti. Why can't they use that intelligence architecture to catch the 200 plus wanted men and women? Why?
I just want to interject here. As a member of the United States military, in 1994, when we entered Haiti, spent 2 years policing up all the weapons that the U.S. had sent to Haiti to overthrow Aristide. There were over 33,000 weapons in circulation. We overthrew Aristide a second time. And I'm certain there probably were closer to 50,000 weapons at that point because Aristide was a lot stronger. And they anticipated a fight, which never happened. Now, if those weapons were being allowed to leave Haiti and be sold to Jamaica, St. Kitts, the various Caribbean islands out there, you would think that the prime ministers in all these sittings would have called in the American ambassador and asked them, look, this is on your watch. This is your problem. And we are suffering because of it. We need you, and we need the U.S. to intervene and to do prolonged searches and seizures to intercept anything on the sea that's coming our way. You've got U.S. Southcom that does monitoring using drones, satellites. Why can't we position those satellites, utilize those drones to watch our 140 or whatever illegal ports and to ensure that they're sharing the intelligence with our folks?
So you're suggesting that our security must be left in the hands of the United States and not in our own hands?
We don't have the full capability. That's what I'm saying.
I see.
If we want drone patrols, we can't have drones that fall out of the sky when they run out of gas.
Well, let me just respond to that about the security being in the hands of the U.S. I just mentioned 140 illegal points of entry. That says it all. That's the answer to your question. And let me just complete the circle that my colleague started. Not only should we have the ambassador called in and have him address the security issues as they affect Jamaica, but we also should have our representatives in the United States meet with State Department officials, and through those meetings, they can meet with ATF, FBI, DEA, whatever, so on and so forth. And I'm telling you this because I've seen it done. I've sat at the table. This is not something I'm telling you I read out of a book or somebody told me a story. I sat at the table. I know how that sausage is made, and I can tell you that it's not being done in Washington, it's not being done in Miami, and it's not being done in New York.
But the challenge people may have, so we accept, and so can't we not deal with more than one things at the same time? So we address the matter of our borders and preventing the guns coming in. But persons may ask you, persons are dying now, and we know that there are thousands of guns in communities killing residents now. How do we get rid of those guns already on the island?
One way of addressing the problem is through the establishment of an intelligence center. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say. And Jamaica, they have refused assistance from the diaspora in that regard. They continue to conflate information with intelligence, and they're not the same. Until you get an intelligence center, and by the way, you have pieces of it there. You have NIA, you have military intelligence, you have CTOC, you have MOCA, you even have the Tourism Resilience Center. Why is it that we cannot get all of these stakeholders into one room where we can pipe information in, we can have the analysts look at the stuff, we can have the investigators go out and do whatever they need to do, we can develop a source base. And therein lies the problem, because in Jamaica, it's a popular mantra, infama fi dead. Now, in my former world, infama fi live. Reason for that is because we protect people and we protect lives. I'm not sure Jamaica is mature enough, the intelligence service, the law enforcement service is mature enough to do that. Until they can do that, then they will not get full participation of the citizenry.
In your view, Mr. Nelson, because an interesting part of what we heard coming from the National Security Minister this week as well is, in addition to addressing the matter of illegal weapons, is that the proposed new legislation will also address how it is that we regulate and even deal with licensed firearms, the registered firearms on the island. What are your thoughts in terms of how can we approach that matter in terms of dealing with the registered firearms and the regime that's important for us to have to really deal with the problem that we have in Jamaica?
I believe that the licensing of firearms has to be removed from the political arena, because at this point it's so important. I believe the licensing of firearms should be either in the JDF or in the JCF camp directly. It should be supervised in a way that allows citizens who live in the areas designated as red zones have the opportunity to arm themselves. It should be supervised in a manner that allows communities, homeowners, home associations to organize along the lines of, citizen patrol, citizens on patrol. A lot of that happens here in the U.S. We have the Jamaica Eye, and the Jamaica Eye can be the eyes and ears observing these groups as they move around on patrol. The police can be pre-positioned to react to situations that appear to be getting out of control. But we have to be smart, smarter communities in action to take back the communities. When we go and we approach the dons, or we go down to a nightclub or some other business that the dons are running, and the citizens want to challenge here in the U.S., they go as a church group and they march on that position and they sing and they praise God and they make a lot of noise. The police is in the background, and there's nothing that the dons can do because they're disrupting, could be prostitution or whatever business they're running, the drug trafficking or whatever, for that period. And more of this has to come from the organization of these communities in Jamaica. You cannot sit back and say the police is going to do it all, because we have another problem that we have not even talked about, which is the corruption.
Yeah.
The corruption in Jamaica is way overboard.
I'm afraid we have run out of time, Mr. Nelson. Thanks so much for joining us, Herb Nelson and Wilfred Rattigan, our guests on our panel discussion this evening.